Hi, here we are, summarizing Chapter 7 of Giddens et al. Introduction to Sociology, where he looks at conformity, deviance, and crime. In looking at conformity, deviance, and crime, the learning objectives are primarily how we define deviance and how it is related to social power and social class. To be able to recognize the ways in which we encourage informity and know the leading sociological theories of crime and how each is useful in understanding deviance. Also, the need to recognize the usefulness and limitations of things such as crime statistics and understand that some groups or individuals are more likely than others to commit or be victims of crime, and to explore the different explanations for the decline in crime as well as consider the ways in which individuals and governments can address crime. Among the terms that we learn in deviance is norms. What is norms? Norms simply is rules of conduct that specify appropriate behavior in a given range of social situations. A norm either prescribes a given behavior or forbids it. Norms and sanctions. Norms are carried, all social norms carry sanctions that promote conformity and protect against nonconformity. A sanction is a mode of reward or punishment that reinforces socially expected forms of behavior, while laws are rules of behavior established by political authority and backed by state power. A crime is a result of any action that contravenes the laws established by a political authority. What is deviance? Deviance consists of modes of actions that do not conform to the norms of values held by most members of a community or society. What is regarded as deviant is as variable as the norms and values that distinguish different cultures and subcultures from one another. Forms of behaviors that are highly esteemed by one group may be regarded negatively by others. Society and crime, looking at sociological theories. The functionalist theory. The functionalist theories argue that crime occurs when the aspiration of individuals and groups do not coincide with available opportunities. To examine this, we'll take a look at that of two functionalist theories, that of Emile Durkheim and Robert Merton. Emile Durkheim. Emile Durkheim introduces the term anomie. Anomie is a concept that was first brought into wide usage by Durkheim to refer to a situation in which social norms lose their hold over individual behavior. Durkheim believed that anomic situations made people feel disoriented and anxious. Anomie, therefore, heightens disposition to suicide. Durkheim saw crime and deviance as inevitable elements in modern societies where there is more room for individual choice. He believes that deviance was necessary to introduce new ideas and social challenges to bring about change and to promote social boundary maintenance between good and bad behavior. Robert K. Merton. He saw deviance as a byproduct of economic inequalities. He split people into five possible types based on how they respond to tensions between socially endorsed values and the limited means of achieving them. The five types are conformist, innovator, ritualist, retreatist, and rebel. Conformist. This is a group that accept generally held values and the conventional means of realizing them, regardless of whether they meet with success. Innovators accept socially approved values but use illegitimate or illegal means to follow them. Ritualists conform to socially accepted standards, though they have lost sight of their underlying values. Retreatists have abandoned their competitive outlook, rejecting both the dominant values and the approved means of achieving them, while rebels reject both the existing values and the means of achieving them, but work to substitute new ones and reconstruct the social system. I want you to bring your attention to Figure 2.2 that summarizes Merton's deviance typology. Merton looks at a concept he calls relative deprivation. Here, he tries to answer the question, at a time when society as a whole was becoming affluent, why did crime rates continue to rise? Here, he identified, in response to his question, that the contrast between rising aspirations and persistent inequalities resulted in the recognition that one has less than their peers. So, in terms of relative deprivation, he sees deprivation in which a person feels this is a state that a person feels as they compare themselves to someone else. He saw relative deprivation as an important factor in deviance. Differential association. This is a theory that was postulated by Edwin Sutherland. And according to Sutherland, criminal behavior is learned behavior. And Sutherland goes through, and I may draw your attention to, I invite you to look at the text because the textbook goes into detail in terms of differential association. Because here, Merton identifies criminal behavior as behavior that is learned behavior, but he breaks it down into some of the factors that promotes the learning of this behavior. He argues that when we become deviant, when exposed to a higher level of deviant persons and influences compared with conventional influences. The labeling theory. The labeling theory, as broken down by Edwin Lemert, looks at labeling as an approach that suggests that some people become deviant because of labels attached to their behaviors. He breaks it down to primary and secondary deviance, and according to Lemert, primary deviance is the actions that cause others to be labeled that the actions that cause others to label one as deviant, whereas secondary deviation follows the act of primary deviation, and secondary deviation occurs when an individual accepts the label of deviant and acts accordingly. The conflict theory argues that deviance is deliberately chosen and often political in nature. As inequality increases between the ruling class and the working class, law becomes the key instrument for the powerful to maintain social order. Crime therefore occurs in the context of inequalities and competing interests among groups. The conflict theory views crime as the outcome of an imbalance between impulses toward criminal activity and controls that deter it. It holds that criminals are rational beings who will act to maximize their own reward unless they are rendered unable to do so through their social or physical control. The theory of broken windows is a theory that assumes that you have to address even the semblance of what could be construed as criminal behavior, even before you see behavior occurring. And so the concept of the broken window arose basically from a study done by social psychologist Philip Zimbardo. And he argues that while efforts to maintain public order have shown to reduce the occurrence of some more serious crimes, it remains unclear whether the theory is generalizable to all sorts of crime. So, for example, you see graffiti. The argument here is that you see that, And you need to start examining the possibility of crime taking place, and so you address it before things get worse. What are the theoretical conclusions here? The theoretical conclusions are that criminal and respectable behavior exist on a continuum. Whether someone engages in a criminal act or comes to be regarded as a criminal is influenced by social learning and social surroundings. The way in which crime is understood directly affect the policies developed to combat it. Race and the criminal justice system. Race interacts with our criminal justice system to allow some deviants to enter mainstream society while cutting off those same pathways for others. Today, many sociologists are interested in the ways our legal system disproportionately punishes individuals of color, especially African American men. So, what you will find in prisons are our prisons are um, have disproportionately more African American males, and one may argue that this is deliberate as it is racially construed. Mass incarceration. The United States locks up more people per capita than any other country. Critics say a privatized prison industrial complex has grown to support financial and political interest in expanding the prison system. Mass incarceration has had a particularly deleterious effect on Black communities, and African Americans are disproportionately represented amongst the prison population. For example, we know that in areas where there are prisons, those areas tend to be more affluent because the dollars that are made from the prison population goes toward embracing and building up those communities. The death penalty. David Garland argues that three features of the American political system at the federal and state level explain the historical development of capital punishment in Jamaica. Sorry, in America, my bad. The state's relative autonomy from the national state, the local control of the power to punish, and the political dominance from small groups. And here I turn your attention to figure 7.4 that looks at support for the death penalty in the United States. Security and terrorism. According to Harry Malach, he argues that profiling on the basis of specific characteristics can help people to become deviant by showing them which rules they need to circumvent. He believes that social order is best maintained by practices that individuals themselves negotiate rather than practices imposed by a higher authority. Reporting on crime and crime statistics, criminologists think that about half of all serious crimes and even a larger proportion of less serious crimes go unreported. For example, here in New York, we've been hearing a lot about the crime on our subways. And one minute we hear that crimes are increasing, and the next minute we hear that it's not increasing, right? So this speaks to the amount of crimes that are actually reported and how that report comes out. Victims and perpetrators of crime. Crime and victimization are not randomly distributed amongst the population. Sex, age, and location impact an individual's likelihood of committing or being a victim of crime. Turn your attention to the right, figure 7.6, that looks at the rate of violent victimization in 2015. And of course, we know that if we're to look at this for 2022, we'll see dramatic differences in terms of the number of people per capita that has been victimized, specifically as it pertains to violent crimes. Gender in crime. It often seems that there's an imbalance in the ratio of men to women in prisons. Now, it is theorized that the difference between male and female rates of crime are likely contributable to differences in socialization and attachment, like attachment to children and relatives, that may deter one group from committing deviant acts as opposed to another gender group. Crimes against women. Only about a third of instances of rape and sexual assault are reported to the police. It is estimated that one quarter of women are victims of violence at some point, but all women face the threat of such crimes directly or indirectly. Rape is generally recognized in law as a type of criminal offense, not just as a sexual offense. Crimes against gays and lesbians. Because sexual minorities remain stigmatized and marginalized in many societies, they are more often treated as deserving of crime rather than as innocent victims. Lesbian, gay, Lesbian women and gay men who display their sexual identities in public are often blamed for making themselves vulnerable to crime. This notion ultimately denies both the essential personhood and rights of the victim. Crimes of the powerful. These are crimes committed by people in positions of affluence, power, and wealth, and have far reaching consequences than petty crimes often committed by poor people. White collar crime or criminal activities carried out by those in white collar or professional jobs, while most white collar crimes do not appear in official statistics and perpetrators rarely go to jail. Corporate crimes. Corporate crimes are offenses committed by large corporations in society. Examples of corporate crime includes pollution, false advertising, and violations of health and safety regulations. Cybercrime. Cybercrime includes criminal activities by means of electronic networks or involving the use of information technologies. Electronic money laundering, personal identity theft, electronic vandalism, and monitoring electronic correspondence are all emergent forms of cybercrime. Can we reduce crime through new policing techniques? Interesting. A new sociological perspective suggests that policing is now less about controlling crime and more about detecting and managing risks by communicating knowledge about those risks to other institutions. Punitive policing, like stop and frisk, creates a culture of mistrust and resistance to authority, and it is actually not clear that a greater police presence translates into lower crime rates. Can we eliminate deviance? Through policing? Through shaming? I don't know. In some cases, not complying with the rules may facilitate social interaction, reduce power inequalities, or enable positive social change. New high rates of data collection have raised new concerns about a citizen's right to privacy in the contemporary age. This ends the summary of Chapter 7, Giddens et al. Introduction to Sociology.